Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and today we're going to be discussing a multi-day severe weather outbreak that's going to be occurring here from the Ozarks all the way to the Ohio River Valley, going all the way down into the deep south and the southeast. So we're really going to have to watch out for this. A lot of information for me to give you all. So if you guys would do me a favor, please be sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and share this with friends and family and on social media, as well as follow me on social medias. Link to all of that will be in the description down below. I also have timestamps here for all the stuff that I will be discussing. So we have our activity that's going to be happening on Monday. I will break it down into 3 separate events. So there's going to be the Mississippi and Ohio River Delta that we're going to talk about, as well as the Mississippi River Valley and the Ohio River Valley first. Then we're going to be talking about the Central Plains, the South Central Plains, that general vicinity. And then we're going to be talking about the Southeast, that general vicinity for some severe storms. And so I'll be dissecting that into 3 different parts. And then we're also going to be talking about the Deep South and as to what they could potentially be getting here tomorrow on Tuesday. So if you guys want to skip to those particular spots in the video, feel free to do so. But for right now, we're going to get on to what we know today, which is our day 1 outlook for severe weather. We have a 3 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here, which includes eastern parts of Oklahoma, northern parts of Arkansas, into southern parts of Missouri, all the way through into the Ohio and Mississippi River Delta, going all the way into the Ohio River Valley towards Louisville. So if you live here near Evansville, Louisville, southern parts of Illinois and Indiana, all the way down towards the southern parts of Missouri into northern parts of Arkansas, you guys need to really monitor the storm for some severe weather. We also have a massive slight risk, which extends all the way up into Iowa, near the Quad Cities, all the way down to Jefferson City and St. Louis, down towards Norman, Oklahoma, and Tulsa, down to Wichita Falls, and even including parts of Lubbock. So that will continue to hamper areas that have been seeing severe weather for the past 2 weeks. So if you guys live over there, you guys know the drill already. You're 100% going to want to monitor these storms for some severe weather. We also have another slight risk over here, a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale that includes places like Birmingham, Columbus, Atlanta, all the way over to Columbia, and maybe even a little bit south of Charlotte, North Carolina. So definitely something we're going to have to monitor as time continues to progress. I'm actually going to move my face over here to the side so that you guys can see the further risks here in the video. Hail, this is a pretty widespread hail risk. I mean, you're going to see a common occurrence here as to how widespread this risk actually is. So you can see the 5% is indicated in brown, your 15% is indicated in yellow. So whatever chance you have, that's your probability of getting 1-inch size hail or larger within 25 miles of a point. You also have this pesky hatch risk here, which is located over Texas and Oklahoma. And so that is indicated in this black circle with the dotted lines right in the middle. And that is your significant risk for severe weather. Specifically in this case, you have a 10% chance or greater probability of seeing 2-inch size hail or larger within 25 miles of a point. I'm fully anticipating that to be likely here within some of these areas. And so definitely something that they're really going to want to watch out for as time continues to progress here later on this evening. Then we also have our wind risk, a much larger wind risk here for the most part. You can also see that there is a new risk here, a 30% chance for wind, which is indicated in the red. That is the reason why there is an enhanced risk for severe weather here today. And so whatever probability you have, whether it's 5, 15, or 30, you have that chance of seeing 58-mile-per-hour wind gusts and above within a 25-mile radius. But you also have that pesky hatched risk again right within here. And so what this means for severe weather is that you can get hurricane-force winds or above, a 10% chance or greater probability of seeing 74-mile-per-hour winds or greater within 25 miles of a point. And that is that could easily topple trees and power lines and do damage to sidings and houses. We also have a tornado risk, a pretty widespread tornado risk, that is. You can see how wide the 2% actually expands. And so 2% indicated in green, 5% indicated in the brown. This does include places like Atlanta, all the way over to Columbia. You also have places here near Peoria and Springfield, all the way down towards Fort Smith, Arkansas, and all the way down through towards Evansville and Louisville. So a widespread risk for tornadoes is possible here. The 2% is, it is really close to it being very marginal. So don't let the massive risk fool you. But the chances for tornadoes is possible here across that green, and a lot more likely here in the browns. If you live in there, definitely something you're going to want to monitor. All right, let's talk about the first area that is going to be impacted by this, and it's going to most likely be the worst area that's going to be impacted by this, or one of the worst areas, and that's the Mississippi and Ohio River Delta, the Ohio River Valley into the Mississippi River Valley into the Ozarks. So one thing actually before I get started, if you want to stay along with the time here, follow me along. The time is at the top of the screen. And so if I talk about anything that's pretty interesting to you, feel free to look up to the top of your screen. You'll be able to see what all is happening. But as this continues to move on through, I'll also move over my face, you can see how the storms really kind of just stay localized towards Illinois. And everyone must be wondering, what all is happening? There's a giant risk here for severe weather in Arkansas and Missouri and Illinois and Kentucky. You have the risk for severe weather up here along this line, but there's nothing firing off just yet down at the bottom. And that's when I say, just wait a second, please, because you'll really see it start to fire off. But around 7 o'clock, it'll really start to impact places near Peoria, all the way down towards St. Louis. You'll get a lot of strong gusty winds, maybe even the chance for tornadoes with that one. But really something you're going to have to monitor as time continues to progress. Then here's 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Storms really start to kick off here. And this is when things really start to officially fire off. This is when it really starts to just push on through and become this strong, massive, gusty wind and a potentially tornado threat. And as this continues to move on through, it starts to consolidate a bit more towards a line. So you can see the broken line QLCS right here, a quasi-linear convective system that surges on through. And so by midnight, you have a long line of storms that are surging on through here, and it extends all the way from Indiana into Illinois, Kentucky, all the way down to the boot heel of Missouri, down towards Arkansas and even Oklahoma. And this is what your big risk for severe weather will most likely look like. And so we really have to watch out for this as this moves on through overnight. I highly recommend that if you have a weather radio, you make sure you keep it on overnight. You make sure that you have batteries, or if it's plugged in, and you make sure that it is on. And if you don't have something like that, then turn on the emergency alert system for your phone. Emergency notifications, that's the stuff that gives you like the amber alerts and the severe thunderstorm warnings and stuff like that. I highly recommend turning those on overnight, because a very strong storm will be moving on through when it is dark. So really got to watch out for this as this continues to move on through all the way into the morning hours. It looks like it starts to tamper off a bit more towards the morning hours, so that is the good news. But still, overnight threat here. That's the risk here, and a lot more people are unaware as to what happens overnight, and so you really have to monitor the situation very carefully. Dew points, just by looking at the moisture here, you can see that the moisture is actually pretty strong. Some of these yellows indicate 60 to even mid to upper 60s in your dew points. Anything above 60 is relatively moist for the most part. Anything in these oranges indicate 70s and above. You can see how the dew points actually get above the mid 70s into almost the upper 70s here in some of these areas, and that is extremely moist. A lot of moisture here with these storms. A lot of moisture returned from the Gulf of Mexico that has really surged up a lot of this unstable energy here within these general vicinities. So definitely something to keep in mind with this storm, that the setup is here for some intense moisture within some of these areas. Your convective available potential energy numbers, which basically is the displacement between the warm air rising and the cold air sinking in the atmosphere. So the more of that in the atmosphere, the higher the energy levels for thunderstorms are, or convective available potential energy. Typically, you want over 2,000 joules per kilogram in order to consider strong, severe storms. And so anything in these yellows is, yellows and oranges is around 2,000 joules per kilogram. Anything above that is really starting to get into the heavy numbers, and we're starting to see major amounts of convective available potential energy numbers across the board here, especially into places like Oklahoma, Arkansas, down into Texas, and we'll get into that in a bit. But as of right now, within the main risk area, there is a plethora amount of energy for these storms to feed off of, and so the question of sustainability will most likely not will most likely be answered here with a resounding yes, it will most likely sustain overnight. Your wind shear here, we're looking at the low-level jet at 850 millibars. This is about 1 kilometer up in the sky. You can see there's some decent veering here from the southwest. There's also some pretty interesting low-level jet, actually a surface low pressure system that moves on through here in Illinois. So the localized threat for tornadoes is possible because of how the vorticity has spiked within that area. But you do have some decent veering here within the Delta area, right within here. And so I'd watch out for some tornadic potential to be along the edges of these storms, especially here near the Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, that general vicinity right within there for tornadic potential. I'd really want to watch out for it. Your 700 millibar jet, which is right near the mid-levels. It's right below the 500 millibar jet. So we're looking at about 3,000 kilometers up in the sky. And there is some veering with these storms. There is 100% some veering with these storms down here in that area that I talked about. So I would not be surprised if we saw something tornadic right within this area. And you guys really need to watch out for this as time continues to progress. So right within here, I would watch out for some tornadic potential overnight. That would, in my opinion, be the greatest chance of seeing some tornadoes. It would be right within there if there was anything to form. I also did take a sounding of this environment to be able to tell me as to what all most likely is going to be happening. So for those of you who might be looking at this, you guys might be looking at me pretty funny because a lot of you just see a bunch of squiggly lines and a lot of numbers and a lot of stupid stuff that will make you want to click off the video. And I highly encourage you to stick around for a bit, and I will be able to explain as to what all this means to you. So first thing I want to look at is the hodograph. What this tells you is if you had a weather balloon that was set off into the atmosphere and you were tracking it, you would actually be right about here, and you had your radar. Your radar would actually show you where your weather balloon actually goes as it goes up into the atmosphere. So all this right within here, that is the track of the weather balloon as it ascends with height. And so a lot of activity here. You can see how it eventually goes to the north and it eventually curls off and heads towards the east. Then it even curls off down to the south a little bit. So we have a really interesting hodograph here. Anytime you see the 0 to 3 kilometer shear curl off like this, veers off towards the right like this, anytime you see that red line veer off to the right like this shows you that you do have tornadic potential within the general environment, and that is exactly what we have here. And so this checks off as a tornadic sounding, a tornadic hodograph, I should say. And so the wind shear component of this, the veering within the atmosphere, is indeed prominent. If we take a look at the energy levels, the convective available potential energy I was talking about earlier, you can see is around 3,000 joules per kilogram. So the energy levels are not impacting this event whatsoever here within that general vicinity. Your limiting factor is almost non-existent, so that won't be that big of an issue. Lapse rates lack a little bit to be desired, so not as much hail, not as much of a hail threat, most likely. But it'll definitely be a strong gusty wind and maybe even tornado threat that'll head on through here within that delta vicinity. All right, let's talk about the southern plains now. South central to southern plains here in Oklahoma and Texas. This is 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time. We have some scattered storms that are here in New Mexico general vicinity, but then we also have a storm that really starts to fire off here and heads off towards Lubbock. And the people near Lubbock, I'd say, really need to watch out for the storm from the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock hours. 100% could see a strong storm there that could produce some very large hail. You also have some storms that really start to fire off here across Dallas, Fort Worth, and even further south of that. And so I'd really want to watch out for those storms. Potential sleeper event within this general vicinity for the potential for some tornadoes as well. There isn't a risk for tornadoes down there according to the Storm Prediction Center, but I would really want to watch out for that as this continues to move on through. Definitely the worst risk for severe weather would have to be hail, in my honest opinion. But as I said, something that we're really going to have to watch out for as this continues to move off towards the north and east and even due east. This line of storm, this giant thunderstorm here from Lubbock continues to march on through here towards the east. Moves just to the south of Childress, but heads into the general vicinity of Wichita Falls. And so I would really want to watch out for the progression of these storms as this continues to move on through. The question of sustainability will come into question a little bit due to the fact that it is on the rear of the low pressure system, the triple point. So we'll have to watch out for that as time continues to progress on through. But Dallas, Fort Worth, still in those thunderstorms as this continues to head on forward towards the east. Even some more storms that form on through here just to the south and east of Tulsa, to the south and east of Oklahoma City. And so a lot of storms that are really starting to fire off through here and are really starting to ramp up. And so Fort Smith, this will really start to impact your areas more or less towards the overnight into the midnight hours. And this will really start to form into a very consolidated line of storms that'll push on through. Dew points here, a lot of moisture with this, almost comparable to what all was happening in the Delta area, the Ohio and Mississippi River Valley. You can take a look and see how prominent the dew points are. Some and upwards are in a consistent 75 to 76 degree dew points. That is really moist within some of these areas. You can also see there is some moisture back behind the triple point. And so that's the reason why you have a strong supercell that moved on through near Lubbock. There's decent amounts of dew points with a dry line that's forcing it to completely push off, as well as a cold front. So definitely something we're going to have to watch out for as time continues to progress. But dew points here, a lot of moisture within this environment. You do also have a lot of convective available potential energy. As I said, warm air rises, cold air sinking. The displacement between the two indicates more energy in the atmosphere for thunderstorms to really start to fire off. And that is exactly what we see here. Anywhere within the yellows and the oranges indicate 2,000 joules per kilogram and above. And anything in towards like the reds indicate 3,000, purple into the 4,000, and whites. I was about to say yellows, but whites in the 5,000 to almost 6,000 joules per kilogram vicinity. The maximum amount of convective available potential energy that we see here is actually within the 6,000 joules per kilogram vicinity. That is a lot of CAPE that is moving on through here. And so if there's any storms that form along this, then they can definitely produce some large hail. And even though places like San Antonio isn't in a risk, I would watch out for some storms to potentially form off of there, and large hail could be the threat if that is the case. So really something to watch out. Yeah, as I said, Austin, San Antonio, that general vicinity, I'd just monitor tonight, especially as it gets in towards the overnight hours. Once it gets around, I'd say 11 o'clock towards midnight, that's when I say you guys could probably start to reel back a little bit. But I'd definitely monitor that system 100%. Your low-level jet here, low-level wind shear, is a very prominent low-level jet here for the most part. You can see how it's ever so prominent off of the Gulf of Mexico. It's almost a reoccurring low-level jet that just sits right within here. I probably should give a name for it, but it's just this consistent low-level jet that sits right within this general vicinity and doesn't do more than that. And so you do have your low-level jet here in upwards of 30 to 40 knots. So it is a decent low-level jet here for these storms to kick off. You have a lot of these southwesterlies, these winds coming out from the southwest. So you do have some, something that could indicate some potential veering. If we go to the upper-level jet here, well, the mid to upper-level jet, the 500 millibar wind shear, you do have a little bit of veering within this area. So the potential for some tornadoes cannot be ruled out within these storms. So definitely something that we're going to have to watch out for, especially since if it kicks into that low-level jet, we could potentially see something tornadic. I took a sounding of this environment too, and so we're looking at the environment here. As I said, most of you might want to click off the video because of how complex this may look with all the lines and stuff, but as I said, it's a lot easier than it actually looks. First thing we're going to talk about is our hodograph. As I said, if you guys could imagine a radar right here and you tracking a weather balloon being lofted up into the atmosphere. So right within that pink dot right there is where the radar is. You can see the weather balloon travel all the way throughout the atmosphere and how it moves off through. So right within those areas, you can see that how the weather balloon goes north and then it starts to head to the north and east. And that indicates that there is some veering in the atmosphere. Anytime we see this red line start to curl off to the right like this, that indicates the potential for something to be tornadic, mainly because of how the more veering there is in the atmosphere, the stronger the supercells typically could get, and the potential for tornadoes to potentially be there as well. So you have that spin as you go with height. And so really something we're going to have to watch out for. This sounding I actually took in eastern Oklahoma into Arkansas, and so you do have some decent veering. You have a lot of energy here, up to 5,000 joules per kilogram cape. Not a whole lot of limiting factor. Your lapse rates will not be an issue. Large hail forecasted off of this, and I fully anticipate it, especially with this dry spike right here at 850 to 700 millibars. A lot of activity here with these storms here, right within this area, and yeah, very large hail I could anticipate off of these storms. Let's take a look at a sounding here in just to the east of Dallas-Fort Worth. You can see you still have that veering off to the right, but then you have a little bit of veer that goes back up to the north towards 3 kilometers. But anytime you see it curl off to the right, you do have the potential for it to be tornadic. It'd be a lot more surface-based, but you still have a chance for something to be tornadic within that general vicinity. So definitely something to watch out for. I am fully anticipating this to be a Cape Bomb event. If there is any sort of updraft or tornadic updraft to form within these storms, I would expect it to start to go, and a lot of people might be underestimating the threat as to how tornadic it actually could be, especially with the amount of cape on top of these storms and the decent veering with height. Now let's take a look at the event here that's happening in the deep south. And as if you live here in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, you guys might be thinking, well, we get thunderstorms right now. That's what we're getting. And you're right. You're getting a lot of thunderstorms here for the most part. Some could be tornadic, but for the most part, it's relatively tame. And it's just the prefrontal convection that's really happening. Well, most of this stuff is prefrontal anyways, but the pre-evental convection that's really happening within some of these areas. So in the morning hours, this is really starting to kind of push on through. You can see how this is just really scattered, a lot of scattered activity in northern Georgia into Alabama. Then we're starting to see a lot more of these storms to kind of become discrete, and that's when they could potentially become tornadic. And as this moves on through into the afternoon hours, you can see how it really starts to push on through central parts of Alabama into Georgia, and that's where it really could become tornadic. But unlike some of these other events, this will most likely end as it gets towards the overnight hours and towards midnight. So that is the good news with this event. Dew points, decently moist across the board here. Anything above 60 is when it gets moist. And you would typically want to look for dew points over 60 in order to get severe storms. And so most of these areas, you have dew points in upwards of the low to upper 60s, even 70s in some of these areas here in Alabama. So moisture will not be a limiting factor here with this event. Your convective available potential energy, which is just the warm air rising, cold air sinking. So the displacement between the two causes more energy in the atmosphere for thunderstorms to be able to form and even sustain as time moves along. And so whenever you see these yellows and these oranges, that's when you know you have a plethora amount of energy for these storms. That is 2,000 joules per kilogram and above. And so there is some decent energy here within this general vicinity, and we want to for sure watch out for these storms as time continues to progress. Low-level jet here. For the most part, you have a decent low-level jet here coming from the southwest. So it's not all too bad. If we take a look at the upper level jet to see if there's any veering, there is indeed some veering. more of these westerly. So it is a bit tornadic within some of these areas. Your wind shears and upwards of around 30 to 50, 30 to 40, 30 to 40 knots at 700 millibars, which is our mid-level jet, right around that area. So we have a lot of veering with height and a lot of surface-based supercells that could develop, similar to how it was yesterday. So we're really going to have to watch out for these storms as time continues to progress. I took a sounding of this environment as well, just to see as to what all we could potentially see from these storms. You can see how the hodograph here still curls off to the right. If you guys were tracking it, as I said, like a weather balloon right at this point, you'd be able to see how the weather balloon would go and track with height. So it's almost as if you have a radar and you're seeing as to how it functions, how it moves throughout the atmosphere. And so we do see that veering at the 1 to 3 kilometers, this red line that curls off to the right, that general spin in the atmosphere. And that is favorable for something to become tornadic here from a wind shear perspective. So profiles are good in that perspective. Your CAPE is almost around 2,000 joules per kilogram. So energy shouldn't be as much of an issue, but it is very spotty. So I'm expecting to see a lot of these surface-based action, 100%. Not a lot of tall supercells that you would expect over in Texas and Oklahoma. But the potential for something to be tornadic is there here, according to the sounding. Lapse rates are actually not very bad for it becoming a Dixie Alley event. Really good, actually. So something to keep in mind with this as this progresses later on this evening. All right, day 2 outlook here. This is on Tuesday. Massive enhanced risk here. A 3 out of 5 for severe weather, which does include southern parts of Tennessee into northeastern parts of Louisiana, almost much of Mississippi, which got impacted by the tornado outbreak on Sunday, as well as Alabama and northwestern parts of Georgia. So if you live in these areas, you definitely are going to want to watch out for severe weather. You also have a massive slight risk, which extends over through the Appalachians, I should say, into the Ohio River Valley. And so we're really going to have to watch out for these storms as this continues to move on through. Your hail threat is pretty extensive for the most part. 5% indicated in brown, 15% indicated in yellow. Whatever probability you have, that is your chance of seeing 1-inch size hail or larger. You also have a pesky hatched risk right within here. This black circle with the dotted lines in the middle, that indicates a significant risk for severe weather. A 10% chance or greater of seeing 2-inch size hail or larger within that general vicinity. So if you live in these areas, you really are going to want to watch out for some severe weather that could hamper your day on Tuesday. You also have a massive wind risk here. This is the reason why there is an enhanced risk for some of these areas. And so the threat for wind exists. A 5% chance indicated in brown, 15 in yellow, 30 in red. So whatever risk you are in, you have that probability of seeing gusty winds in upwards of 58 miles per hour or greater within a 25-mile radius. So you guys are really going to want to watch out for that as well. The potential for this to potentially be upgraded is possible with how large this risk is, and it very well could be localized into a specific area. So the threat for a 4 out of 5 on a severe weather scale is possible with with the upcoming outlooks. You also have a giant risk for tornadoes. A 5% chance for tornadoes could also be upgraded to a 10% as well due to how large the risk is. A very widespread risk for tornadoes for the most part here. 5%, which extends at the southern parts of Tennessee all the way down towards the northeastern parts of Louisiana, all the way through Mississippi, Alabama, and into northwestern Georgia. So 5% indicated in brown, and you also have your 2%, which is indicated in green right within these areas. So definitely something we're going to have to monitor. Timings with this event, you can take a look here and you can see that there's a lot of prefrontal convection here across the board in the early morning hours tomorrow. So this isn't really the main risk for tornadoes, but you do have a lot of these thunderstorms that could potentially become tornadic. So we're really going to have to watch out for this as time moves along. Excuse me. And so we have a lot of thunderstorms here. Definitely a flash flood risk that could occur here as well. But a lot of these storms that are really surging on through all the way into the early afternoon hours. You can see here based off of the time, this is around noon, and a lot of these storms here that are really starting to continue to sustain from the day prior are really moving into this general vicinity, and the threat for winds is possible as this now starts to form into a consolidated line, a huge consolidated line here, and as that continues to move on through, this will create some very strong gusty winds. As I said, around 60 miles per hour, maybe even above that, even towards the afternoon into the evening hours. But the good news is that this seems to tamper off as this heads further and further south and more and more in towards the midnight and overnight hours. So that is the good news here. Dew points here within this event, very moist for the most part. You can see almost your entire screen is yellow and orange, so that is pretty moist for the most part. It's 60 degrees and above. Even these oranges are 70 degrees and above, and whenever you get into the 70s, that is really moist, and so there's definitely the threat for some severe weather within this general vicinity, but a lot of moisture within some of these storms. Your convective available potential energy in the morning is pretty prevalent for the most part. As I said, warm air rising, cold air sinking, displacement between the two. If there's more displacement, there's more energy in the atmosphere for thunderstorms to be able to form and even sustain. Anything above 2,000 joules per kilogram is enough for strong storms to be able to develop. And so anywhere in these yellows and oranges, this indicate 2,000 joules per kilogram and above. You have a lot of yellows and oranges across the board here, so energy will not be a limiting factor here in this event, especially in the morning. I said this was happening in the morning. Let's check out what happens later on in the day, and most of you guys are going to be pretty surprised because it goes from this to this. A lot of energy here across the board in southern parts of Mississippi and Louisiana, even into Alabama. And so we're really going to have to watch out for this. Some convective available potential energy amounts even get up into the 5,000 joules per kilogram vicinity, double the amount of what you actually would need for severe storms to be able to form off and sustain. And so with that much energy, you could definitely see a large hail threat, a very strong gusty wind threat, and even the chance for tornadoes to be prevalent here tomorrow. Your low-level jet is pretty interesting for the most part. You can see you have some southwesterlies here within this general vicinity. So the threat for some veering is possible within this. Will even go to the 700 millibar jet here. And you can see how the change with height, a lot of this veering in the atmosphere is possible within some of these storms. And so really something we're going to have to watch out for as time continues to progress within this general vicinity. As I said, multi-day severe weather event that's going to be happening here. Multi-day severe weather outbreak within some of these areas. Some strong wind shear, some stronger amounts of energy, which can only mix together and form some bad news for some of these areas impacted. So really something we're going to have to watch out for. Alright, before we end off the video, I just want to give a huge shout out to all the people who are members on the channel. They're basically sponsors, and they fund the channel every month. So $5 a month is all they give, and that actually helps me out so much. I can't believe all of these people that have helped us out here. We have 20 members here, 20 weather enthusiasts on our channel, and so all these people are right here on the screen. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. I really do appreciate it. And so if you guys want to see your name here on the screen, please be sure to sponsor the channel by becoming a community member here on the YouTube channel. That's going to be it for me. If you guys did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. A lot of energy to get out. And so a lot of people could potentially be impacted, and we really need to kind of get this information out as soon as possible due to the fact that there is a lot of activity. Another thing that I just wanted to mention is that at the end, right as soon as I made this video, right at the end of it, a tornado watch has been issued. I'm probably not going to be live streaming that until later on this evening. Who knows? I might try and do something, but the tornado watch has been issued, so it's already starting. And we really need to get the information out as much as possible. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate. I'll catch you guys most likely in my live stream later on tonight. So peace out, everyone. Peace.